I wanted to put this back on the proper side of the screen, Tim. And,
it depends if you're left brain, right brain.
And that is the best answer I think I've ever heard. I wanted to talk a little bit about this journey I've been on for the last year with Python. And first, I need to give a major love to Fred Warren back there.
Fred!
Being a Sherpa and a Yoda and just an all-around great guy as I've been trying to delve into like completely unknown territory. We're always, as flame artists, we're always like facing time pressures and budget pressures from our client. It's just this constant pressure of get it done faster and get it done for less. And everyone
still look amazing.
And still look amazing. That's the thing. That's the thing that's become a given. The work has to look great. That doesn't matter. What matters is we have to get it done faster. And so I started looking into Python and seeing what we could do in Flame, but also kind of just as a Flame artist, what could I possibly do to help accelerate some of the things that are time consuming and labor intensive, but are really not inherently billable. And just see what really was possible out there. So I started off, just pulling this up here. Right. I started by experimenting, and just so you know, this is a programming language. I'm not going to tell you that like right out of the gate you're going to figure it out, but it is not impossible. There are some great tutorials that come now with the Flame documentation. And even one of Grant Kay's, it's a bit older, but one of his Learning Channel videos is focused on what you can do with Python. But it's really now like as simple as putting scripts in a folder. Really, they have to be written properly. But if you go into Autodesk Shared Python, if you put anything in there and then refresh Python hooks right here, or rescan Python hooks, your scripts will become available. And let me just show you some of the things that you can do with Python to speed up your workflow. So for example, when we deliver a spot, and these are all like repetitive tasks, I think you'll appreciate this, right? Or even like when we make, I don't know, whenever we make a batch group, or whenever I made a batch group, I was always getting into this habit of like, the first, let's call this first one source, which I misspelled, but we'll get to that in a second. Maybe this one's where I always want to put my references. Maybe this one here is where I'm always going to put my pre-comps. And this became a thing, for every single batch group of renaming. Well, through Python, you can write a script called create new batch group, boom, and that will create one calling it whatever you want to call it, and then the reels will be labeled whatever you want the reels to be labeled. And there can be as many of them as you want, however you set it up. One of the great new features that was added, I don't think this was my request, but that was added recently is being able to call the list of users that are on the system. And so if one user likes to have their reels set up a certain way and another one likes them another way, they can run the same script and then boom, everything will be set up the way that user likes it. So like we started, every time we would work on a project, we would go ahead and create like a library for importing all the stuff you have to import as part of working on your spot. So we'd go into library and maybe we'd call this library import, and then inside that we'd make a folder for our CG and a folder for our audio and a folder for our titles. Every single project, time and time again, right? Well, simple enough. You go ahead and you can write a quick little Python script here that will create a library that has whatever folders in there that you want. Same thing with shared libraries. We're always making shared libraries, and the shared libraries always have somebody's name, and then they would always have like a to and a from and things like that. So let's create a shared library, right? And we'll call it Andy, and now all of a sudden you get a library in here that's got whatever you want in it, to Andy and from Andy. And so these are simple little things, but these are little repetitive tasks that you do over and over and over again. And all these little minutes add up, right? Actually, let me shift this over to my user, because one of the greatest things about the Python scripts is that they can all be assigned hotkeys. If you go into your hotkey editor and sort by hooks, or sort alphabetically by category, and look under hooks here, these are all the little Python scripts that I've written, and so you can create hotkeys for anything. Like I made one for create a new batch group. So this one here, if I do that keyboard command, it makes a batch group. If I need 5 batch groups, then I can go ahead and do 5 times, then I need 5 batch groups. And they'll have your name and your labeling and so on and so forth. When we deliver a spot, let's say, we got into the habit when we deliver a spot of creating a real group for the spot, giving that real group the ISKI code for the spot, and so on and so forth. So I went ahead and wrote a bunch of delivery real group scripts for kind of like even sometimes on a client by client basis or a user by user basis. So if I type in here, an ISKI code, then it'll create for me a real group that's got the reals in the order and the name and everything that I like. We have an account. One of our artists at Lively works on a car account, and all day, every day was creating real groups for each individual region. So I went ahead and made a little script here that has some of the region codes built in, and then you can also make your own, And then if you hit create real groups, you'll get a real group for all of these labeled as needed, and so on and so on and so on. Some of this, this is really like kind of simple nuts and bolts stuff, but again, when you kind of approach this with like, what are these repetitive tasks that I'm doing over and over again, and occasionally screwing up, how many people here have screwed up an ISKI code or a file name, right? No one raised their hand, of course, because the camera's on, but you did all laugh. So, this is also helping to take some of the human error out of the, when it's crazy and everybody's screaming and the client is on fire and people are jumping off of buildings because something has to ship now and they're not going to look at it until 9:30 because they're putting their kids to bed and everything. That's usually when you screw up something like the ISKI code, and then you kind of question all your choices. So I started real small. I started really simple with just some of these little like library things, some of these little kind of everyday things, and then just kind of grew from there. So just show of hands, who here hates extreme reach? Anybody? Yeah. Okay. I was good. Tim, if you didn't, that hand. Oh, yes, you in the back. Thank you. Extreme reach, right? So whenever we deliver a spot, the spot we always at Lively, we always make a spot with 10 seconds of slate, or a slate that starts at 10 and then a second of black at the tail, because that's how we kind of put it in storage, when we collect up the job. But that's not how Extreme Reach, of course, likes their slates. So I wrote a little script here that puts Extreme Reach in and out marks on a spot or a clip based on how long the clip is. So this just sets in and out points with the in at whatever it is, 7, and then the out, and then the in at 7, the out at 2 frames of black at the tail, right? So I decided to take this a step further, right? I'm sure, like everybody, I built a whole series of like export presets for exporting QuickTimes, right? With different codecs or maybe different things for the audio, or whether or not it respects in and out points. One of the options we have in Python is to be able to call export presets. Okay, so I created a Python script called Extreme Reach Export. Look at that. And it opens up a little window here, which right now happens to be pointing at this folder on the machine we have. But part of the Python script looks at the project name. Our project names have the job numbers in them. It then finds the corresponding job number on the server, and then navigates to the folder where we always export stuff on the server. So when this window opens up, it's in the local folder that you need without having to navigate and, of course, ultimately put it in the wrong place. So what's happening now is this clip is being exported essentially twice with 2 different export presets. One that's exporting it for our own purposes, which is an uncompressed QuickTime with a full slate, and then another that's a ProRes 444, but honoring the in and out points. So if I go into the Media Hub here and go into that folder, doing the Python stuff, I've learned to love the mouse again. Right? Yes, so right here, it exported that one clip for me twice. One into an Extreme Reach folder where the slate starts at 7, right? And it's a ProRes 444. And then a Lively folder for our own purposes. That's an uncompressed QuickTime, and we have the full slate. And I didn't have to screw it up, and it did it all for me, and it doesn't matter how many clips you select, it all just happens automatically. If this were an infomercial for like, let's say like a rotisserie, people would be clapping after that demonstration. Thank you very much. And you know how I value my skill set. I compare it with like the Ron Popeil set it and forget it. And so on, right? Like how many times have you had in the middle of all chaos, your producer tell you, could you do me a favor and export a JPEG of every slate so I can email that to the client? What's great is everybody's either eyes are rolling or they died a little, you know? And so the same thing, I went ahead and I wrote a script. There's a example that comes with Flame that kind of shows you all these different possibilities for Python exports. And I wrote a script that will export either the first frame of a clip as a JPEG or wherever you have the in marker set as a JPEG. So if you have 25 clips, you select them all, you pick export, first frame is JPEG, and you get 25 JPEGs in whatever folder you want them to go into.
Could you make one that if you put segment markers in it, that it would export the JPEGs on all the segments, so you could export like a dozen different JPEGs out of that one clip?
You're gonna see something happen in real time now that usually happens over the internet. Fred? Yes, that would be possible. Oh, that was so exciting. Really, now you know the joy that I have. But again, these kind of things are possible, and you know, what's really wonderful about this kind of stuff is we all have different either ways of working or different needs on either an industry by industry basis. The needs for episodic are different from commercial or different from social, and then having this ability here allows us to kind of create whatever we would need for whatever purpose we would need. I don't have the stuff here, but I also wrote a script that would look at the clip name and look for an aspect ratio in the title, like 1:1 or 9:16.
I'll clap for that.
Thank you. Right? And all it would really do is call the export preset that has the crop set to 1080 by 1080. Something else that happens all the friggin' time is we have our clients occasionally like to put titles on things. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this. I know I have. I'm going to switch back to the pen for all the reasons. Okay, and of course, you know, our clients, I didn't really pick the right shot here, but readability is also an issue that has come up of the titles to our client. So occasionally we have to put like schmutz or something, you know, and no one likes drop shadows anymore. I'm hoping that comes back at some point, like everything, you know, comes full circle. So, but we're always doing shit like going in and, you know, all right, well, I got to draw a G mask around this logo. Right, just so I have something that I can then do this, and then go ahead and add a color correct. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to draw each one of these up for every single shot, right? So here's the thing: I need like a bell for. So I wrote a script that just does that. This is what you get when you throw a clip into BFX, and I wrote this thing called the Schmutz Maker, and there you go. And so what you get automatically is what I just drew, or what I just started to pull out, with context points set. So you have context 1 is your backlit, context 2 is your result, and all you really have to do is draw a mask. It's also, you know, possible through Python to call a node setup. So if what you wanted to do was always have like a negative shrink for the titles to get that title that was wider and more blurred, pick a setting that you like, save that as a setup, and instead of loading this GMask tracer node, it could load a matte edge that gives you that as a starting point every single time. And again, you can assign hotkeys to these, and so you can just go through shot by shot and click, 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 click. Right? So the next thing I want to show you is just stuff in batch. Okay, the most fun I ever had, I started with Python in batch. The most fun I had was in batch because you can just very easily, it was the first thing I learned was how to create a node. Right? It was very exciting, and then how to move it and how to name it. And there was one day where I spent like 5 hours on a Sunday trying to make a compass blue. I could not figure it out. And I finally figured it out, and I like screamed, and my cat like just flipped out. But that's, anyway, I'm sharing. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So we all know that we can drag nodes in, it's very easy, but you can also write a script that will add a node or add a series of nodes, okay? So for example, maybe I'll do this shot here instead, right? We all hear, Tim, you just used paint. I saw you use paint and you forgot to hit the, on the whole sequence. How many people here have added a mux node after a paint node to freeze it at a given frame? Show of hands. Those are the real flame artists in the room. Thank you very much. So we all know how to do it, but I wrote a script that's, oh, there we are. Right? That was just add mux node and freeze. Boom. So it adds a mux node with freeze turned on and it labels the mux node with the name of the frame that you happen to be on. Okay? I was on Logic at some point, and what was it? Jesse from Instinctual in LA was just like, you know, adding paint and adding mux nodes on either side, and he was doing it again and again and again, you know, for the reasons. So I went ahead and wrote one for him that adds a mux of paint to freeze, you know, and everything gets connected automatically from side to side. And then, like, speaking of the compass thing, I wrote plug in here a script called encompass selected nodes. I really get very descriptive in my name, and you can call this, you know, hey, and now you have a compass called hey. And of course, again, all those can be assigned to hotkeys. But the real fun comes in like when you get into it, like extreme repetitive stuff. Like you know, you walk in and you get a bunch of mats for a shot, or a bunch of passes or whatever from a shot, and you want to see how they work. And how many of us have, you know, either added, if there's 6 here, 7 comp nodes, or added an action node and 7, and then you attach everything, you turn the front off. So same kind of thing, right? You saw Schmutz Maker. How about you know, Mat Maker? So all this does is takes the selection, adds an action node, and pipes all the things into the thing, and then the output of the thank you. Thank you very much. This man right here. Thank you. As much beer as you would like tonight. Thanks. Yes, it's on Cynicism. One of my first uses for kind of like the, you know, the bigger aspects of doing all this Python stuff was we do a lot of beauty work at Lively, and you know, we get the spot, we get it conform, we break out the batch groups, and as soon as we get the prep, actually before we get the prep, our producer is asking, can the client come in and give red pen cleanup notes? And we keep saying no, we need time to break everything out, and then everybody, of course, you know the drill. So I went ahead and wrote a script here for like a basic batch setup, which is this, okay? And so all it does is automatically take what you're given from either the publish or from the create batch group, and that is your sourcing, your work picture, everything gets put in the right place. You get a red pen kind of notes section here with whatever user's individual paint settings. You know, so this is loading my paint preferences, so I have my brushes set up with 1, 2, 3, and 4. And of course a freeze on a frame, and then a pipe here to go ahead and pre-render a neat video pass, and add the noise back on top. There's also a section in here that looks at the resolution of the clip, because we've been getting a lot of, I don't know about you guys, I've been getting a lot of 8K material for Snapchat deliveries. And that's just not gonna happen. And so, you know, we've kind of been experimenting with like, okay, if this is 6K material, maybe I'll automatically crop it down to 4K or resize it down to 4K. And so I've built in a part of the script that looks at the resolution of the clip that's at the beginning of the tree, and then loads a series of, I've made a series of resize node settings to either scale up or scale down based on that setting there. And then let me just replace this desktop real quick, because just in the interest of doing things over and over again, which is what computers are really great at. So like I said, I've got all my batch groups here, they're all open. I can go ahead and say batch all shots, and it will go ahead and apply that same script to all the shots, or all the batch groups that are open. And so boom, now you're ready for your red pen session or for your clients. And some of the things that are happening under the hood that you don't see is like the T-tap that happens on the render node, so the time code that is on your source clip is added to the render node at the end. There's a Python script that comes, a hook rather, that comes with Flame that will allow a write, something rendered with a write file node to come automatically back in as though it was rendered locally. And of course all the schematic reels here come named the way I want them. All this stuff, I mean, if you have a 30 and there's 25 shots in it, and each one takes 3 minutes to set up, I mean, that's at least 600 hours you just saved. I've never been good at math, that's why I learned Python. But no, it's like hours over the course of a day or a week that you can end up saving. And over the last year or so, we've gotten into episodic work. And episodic work takes whatever we do with commercials with a 30 and just takes it on a scale that is like mind-blowing, okay? Where we'll get 100 shots that need to be prepped and loaded and broken out. We're working on a show right now that was shot on 5 different cameras at 3 different resolutions. Each resolution has its own like cropping or extraction. Each shot has its own CCC file, like on a shot-by-shot basis, and there are 28 LUTs that we've been provided. And so I get an EDL that has in there the LUT that's needed for each shot. And so I wrote a script that will go ahead and parse the EDL, read the EDL, create a CSV file out of that, and then from the CSV, it will just automatically create everything that you see here, which is like one of the shots for the show that we're working on, and all from just like the source clip and the render node. But I have sections here that apply the appropriate LUT. Right? We have I can't give enough props to a guy named Michael Vaglienti. He lives in LA. He has a website called pieflame.com where he's got a bunch of amazing Python scripts. One of them is called Slate Maker. If you guys remember like the shell script that would generate slates from a CSV, this will do the same thing. You give it a CSV, you give it a template file, like a batch setup, a text setup the way you want it, and a background, either like a movie or a still image, and it will create rendered slates for you, it will create setups for you, it will even create clips with like soft effect setups on there for you. Thank you, right? Because I don't know about you, but I never want to make another slate, right? But in the case of like the show that we're working on, all the slates just boom, get generated, and then the right slate gets loaded into the right setup, all based on the shot number of the shots. And I don't know if it's installed here, but I even wrote a Python script that automatically updates the information on the slate based on, like it's all done in 3D text. Let me just see if it happens here, because this setup here is called 101-2820 comp 1. If you iterate this to come through, yes, okay, it's installed. But basically, I wrote this script that has an action node with some 3D text in there, right? Because 3D text is exposed or is part of the Python API, and then we'll go ahead and get from the name of the batch setup here all the information that's needed, and then slice it up to be in the right places. And so whenever I hit iterate, the script is loaded. It then loads an action setup that has this text in it, but changes the name of these files and the date to whatever's needed. And now I don't screw up slates anymore, okay? Which happens more times than I care to really admit, even though I just did admit it. And of course, all the context points that I need are baked in here. Before, after, a work picture, a difference mat to check the work picture, and those contexts can be assigned or updated based on the user. I think I have one here, I don't know if I have it installed, but yeah, Andy context. So it'll look for the nodes. In case I get a setup back from somebody who's changed the context to what they like, this will just reset them back to the way that I use them. That way, problem is solved. And then one last little thing here from PyFlame. Michael has a thing called multi-batch render, which you can select as many batch groups as you want, and then right-click and go to multi-batch render. I won't do it here, but it'll then render all of the batch groups that you have selected. Like if anybody here is old enough to remember laying off 12 spots to D1, it gives you an excellent opportunity to not sit in your chair. So this is just a little bit of an example of what you can do with Python. Again, I can't thank Fred and the dev team enough, because like they listen. Right, the greatest part of every new release is the section of these are the things that we added based on user feedback, and they really do want to hear your feedback. And so go to Flame. I mean, it's great to complain on Logic. We all do it. We love it. But go to Flame Feedback, log a feature request, get your friends to upvote it, and that's how you get it into the software. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share any of this stuff with you. And that's Python with Flame. All right. So thank you for putting up with the crash. Yay.